In case you missed it, Allison was featured in our 25 Weeks of Memories for 25 Years of Conservation blog post that we've been doing. So I'm going to share in a little excerpt from Sarah's article there as a way of a brief intro today. So Allison describes himself as a Florida cracker. His family has been in the state since it belonged to Spain. You could also call him a Renaissance man. Throughout his life, he has worn many hats. He has been a prosecutor, a public defender, a private lawyer, a judge, a sheriff, a law professor, an Episcopal priest, and now the CEO of a nonprofit land conservation organization. He holds degrees in law, criminology, and theology. He has fought for criminal reform and for conservation, among other things, I'm sure. If you have ever heard him talk, you have heard him say, it's now or never. Allison continues to set the bar high. He creates and inspires a shared vision for the staff, and his aspirations for conservation and his perseverance to get the job done have made Florida a better place to live. So, with that, I will turn it right over to you, Allison. We're thrilled to have you with us today.
Well, thank you. I do try and make Florida a better place to live, and of course, when your family's been in Florida as long as mine, and you were here before mosquito control and air conditioning, it's hard not to make it a better place than the way we found it. But what I'm going to talk about today is sort of a history of the land conservation trusts and how they sort of work and how ours works. And I'll be not long-winded, but let me give you the short version is that the idea of holding land in trust is as old as the Roman Empire. Um, People did it for a lot of reasons, most often to try and avoid being seen for what they were doing. But in the modern manifestations, there are basically three kinds. There's private land trusts, which are used um, to um, disguise is probably not the word, but to shield the actual owner of a piece of property from public view and have a nominee handle the public face of the ownership. That's not what we are. And then next are what they call community land trusts, which are often aimed in a civic context at affordable housing. And there is one in Jacksonville, and we get confused with them occasionally. It's relatively new, and we are supportive of what they're doing. I'm actually here at a trustees meeting of the Jesse Ball Pond Fund, where I'm a trustee, and we helped birth the one here locally. We meaning Jesse Ball, and but that's not what we do either. And then the final one is conservation land trust, and that is a um, newer concept, but that is what we do, and that really came out of the late 1800s when America had reached the limit of its expansionary period after we had reached the end of the Wild West, and we had some colonial adventures after that. But for the most part, the psyche of America had begun to transition from um, manifest destiny with no horizon to sort of how do we make this a better place now that we've got it? And there were a lot of manifestations of that. The City Beautiful movement, um, the parklands in places like New York and Boston and Jacksonville, where the Olmsted brothers and Olmsted did the Emerald Necklace, and in Boston did the Central Park in New York, and actually his sons did Memorial Park here in Florida. And the efforts to cut out the massacre of birds in general and in specific for millinery or fashion became manifest. And that resulted in the birth of things like the National Audubon Movement, of which Florida, as this intellectual ferment occurred in America, uh, Florida was right up there with Massachusetts and New York and New Haven as intellectual centers of this. That corridor up and down the St. John's that included people like Harriet Beecher Stowe, who did the first book about conservation in America called Palmetto Leaves. It went all the way down to the founding of Rollins and Stetson at the south end of, at the headwaters of this St. John's River. And these communities were tied to each other intellectually and otherwise in the progressive movement, and which crossed party lines between Teddy Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson and others. So it had some legs to it, and part of it was this idea of uh, embracing and supporting the natural environment instead of just taking what we wanted and slaughtering the buffalo and cutting the timber clear cut without any worry about the future. And that change in psyche was manifested in Boston when Charles Eliot, who was a protege of Olmsted, started the first known example of a conservation land trust in Boston, of course. And it was one, I think it's called the Community Trust or something like that. And it's still in existence up there. And it began to metastasize itself, particularly in the Northeast, where communities would come together and try and preserve some of the historical and cultural and natural features in their communities, and using a nonprofit as the vehicle for that work. And it pretty much stayed isolated to the Northeast for the most part until about the 1970s. And then some folks, also in the Northeast, started playing with the tax codes and seeing where the donation of land or the notion of conservation easements could be utilized to generate tax benefits for the donor. And Stephen Small, who's gone on to become the expert in this, was with the IRS and looked at it from the inside and facilitated it. And then, of course, as the revolving door allows, and I'm a long-time practitioner of it, he went around the revolving door and came out the other side and became the private sector advocate of this new approach. And it spread. And it began to spread south. And it ended up going from one end of the Trust for Public Land out in San Francisco, was advocating it. The Nature Conservancy was born in this time period and advocated it. And it came to my little end of the world in the Keys in the 70s, courtesy of transplants from the Northeast, from Boston. And they brought this idea with them and started the Northwide Land Trust. And we were able to get support from Trust for Public Land and Nature Conservancy, and we're able to grow it from, when I was president, from 100 and some odd members to 5,000, and became the third largest land trust in the country. And we began to spread it across the state. I became the first president of the Florida Land Trust Association, which has had fits and starts and gone on and stopped and started, but it's still around in another iteration. And we began to spread it around. And one of the calls, by then I had moved to Tallahassee to do the uh, Everglades restoration for Governor Bush. And Preservation 2000 had been created by Governor Martinez, with whom I was the running mate for his unsuccessful reelection and my unsuccessful bid for lieutenant governor. But it had birthed some matching fund opportunities that lent themselves to land trusts, and the movement began to spread throughout Florida. I was asked to come over and share some of what we had done and how to do it with Bill McQuilkin and uh, Joe Hickson and some of those folks, and I did, and they started what the North Florida Land Trust. And then when I moved here, I was asked to join their board and then to be the interim and ultimately the longer term CEO with good good results on both the trust end and personally, it's been quite wonderful for me. So thanks. And then um, the toolkit that we use in these trusts are pretty simple. I wish I had paid a little more attention in property law class because I kind of snoozed through it thinking I would not ever need it because I would be a trial lawyer. And turns out I needed a lot. But it's everything that's in the toolkit that if you look at the bundle of sticks, it's a symbol of the Roman Empire. Um, those are your property rights. And it was so important to the Romans that they made it the focus of the shields. You can see the bundle of sticks on it's called a fascia, I think, that's on the Roman shield. And of course, it's pivotal to Anglo American property law. And among those rights are the right to develop it, the right to dig for underground ground for minerals, to go to the sky for high rises, to use and enjoy the property, to use it for agriculture or for housing, and those limits are pretty unlimited. Rights are unlimited in a frontier context, but as more people show up and government shows up, God help us, our bundle of sticks becomes a little bit more restricted. But this is America, and you still have a lot of rights, thank God. And so, um, what we found was that through conservation, we can either buy or have donated to us some or all of those rights. So with our work in the land trust, it's similar to everybody else. We are happy to accept pretty simple donations of everything. And there's land, so thousands of acres that we own in fee, and we can do anything we want to with it. And we choose to do nothing other than conservation in one form or another. And that includes agricultural and historical uh, uses of the property, but it doesn't include development as a normal rule. And we uh, can improve it from a timber standpoint or swap out the timber uses or do those sort of things. Tortoise relocations, mitigation banking. We do utilize the property, but not for development. And then conservation easements are a step down from that, where we don't own the property, but we do own an interest in the land, and that is whatever's in the conservation easement. Traditionally, that would be uh, full-born commercial and residential development rights, oftentimes mineral rights, things like that. Sometimes, in at least Charles Commander's case, he elected to keep the mineral rights. And I'm told that the conversation went something to the effect of, Charlie, there ain't no mineral rights. There's no oil under that land. And Charlie said, yeah, but I'd feel really dumb if they ever found it. And I hadn't retained for my family. And that's fair. So with those conservation easements, we get limited, but actual deeded interest. And then finally, um, even lesser than that, we can be given, presumably, we could be given mineral rights. For instance, I know Audubon, National Audubon, makes a great deal of money off of the oil that's drilled on their property with the mineral rights they have in Louisiana. They don't talk about it much, but it's the truth. I've seen the and wells, and we presumably could receive um, vista rights for opening up the viewscape of a cultural asset. So it's very flexible what we can do with land rights, and we're, under my watch, extremely aggressive about and entrepreneurial about how we go about it. And that's pretty much it. Um, we will do about anything we can do to try and paint the landscape green. And thank you for your support, without which we could not do it at all. And I'll be delighted to throw myself open to any and all questions. Once you've been sheriff of your county, there is no such thing as a tough question. So feel free to um, ask me anything you want, and I'll be delighted to answer it. With that, Abby, I'll kick it back to you, and I'm at your service.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And you're quite brave. You're quite brave saying that they can ask anything. So, um, you guys, if you would like to type a question in the chat, that's an option. Or you can use the raise hand feature and I can unmute you. Looks like Rick might be typing.
Okay. We have a few questions, Allison, for you.
All right. Let me see. I think I can actually pull them up.
Oh, okay. If you'd like me to read them off, I can.
Well,
Brenda, if you don't mind, I'm not sure how the recording works, so those who are watching this later might not be able to see the question.
oh, okay. Well, let's ask the question.
So the first question is, having been in many Navy schoolhouses, there is indeed such a thing as a stupid question. Glad you rephrased it as a tough question. So the next question, what has been your biggest lesson learned while working in land conservation space environment?
The versatility of the toolkit. Um, I think we grow up thinking of property rights as a relatively narrow and arcane uh, concept, and there's a tremendous amount of flexibility and innovative capacity in the common law. And as one of my old professors used to say, when I was a judge, I went to judge's school, and he was from Boston, and they don't have written jury instructions up there. And I said, what guides you? And he said, common law and common sense. I said, well, okay, I guess that'll work. So there's just a lot of magic in the common law that we have accepted into American property law that gives us tremendous capacity to have win-win situations, most of which are not appreciated. But I can tell you, I now get it, and we're doing a lot of it in our land trust with significant, I mean, very significant, 7-digit significant uh, results in the pipeline.
Great, thank you. Next question. I recently came across a Gopher Tortoise Conservancy on Facebook. Have we explored partnerships or alliances with other North Florida groups?
You know, I've seen them on my Facebook, and I have not, I've poked at it, but I haven't done a deep dive. And perhaps if I could ask Lee if you could maybe do a deep dive into their 1099, and let's take a look and see what we can see about them. I want to make sure they're straight up, but assuming that they are, we'd be happy to team up with anybody like Gopher Tortoises. We're doing a lot of mitigation on that as well, with significant financial impact. And we love Gopher Tortoises, so we're all in. Now that said, I'll now horrify everyone. My staff has been horrified with this before, but growing up as a Florida cracker in the middle of the ridge country where Florida cracker reigns supreme without a lot of Yankee interference, we used to love Gopher Tortoises culturally because we thought it was the only food that came with its own pot. But those days are long behind us. And what we now realize is that those burrows, particularly, are absolutely crucial to the ecosystem because they're also burrows for so many other critters, from rabbits to snakes to you name it, insects. And somehow they all manage to cohabit down there in tolerance of each other, at least when they're in the burrow. It's an exercise in peaceful coexistence, even though they perhaps outside would be more prey and predator. But anyway, that's philosophy. Yeah, we'll do a little research and get back on that.
Yeah, Allison, no, it popped up out of the blue. I wasn't looking for it, but they were negotiating for a fairly substantial piece of property that it looks like it resonated with me that it's us with only the sole Gopher Tortoise focus, whereas we have the much broader conservancy piece.
Yeah.
And it looked to me like a natural, and more importantly, I wanted to make sure that we're not finding ourselves in competition, perhaps, for something that they're already focused. See what I'm saying? Is that peaceful cohabitation and collaborative movement forward is kind of what I was hoping to.
Yeah, we try not to. We don't have any. You don't want to get in the price fixing business, but we try not to have competitive spirit in our dealings with other land trusts because that only makes more expensive for all of us. So, conversely, I want to be cautious because it could just be a litigation banking business with a nonprofit facade. And if it is, that doesn't mean we can't do business with them. It just means do business in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
Because, in some respects, that's what we're doing. So, but if they're a business we'll deal with them like a business. If they're a nonprofit, we'll go that route.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with the due diligence and appropriate caution moving forward.
Yeah.
But it just, as you mentioned, sort of my fascination with the gopher tortoise as a flagpole species in the environments that we're most interested in. In fact, let me just suggest to Abby that the gopher tortoise might be a wonderful, wonderful place to focus one of these lunchtime lunch and learns. And in fact, this was a conversation we had, well, as we had in our development meeting last night. Maybe some poor schmo in a gopher turtle costume at the annual event might be amusing. But yeah, I think that we in our group appreciate the importance of that species in the environment, but highlighting it and augmenting the story is, I think, very, very important and could be a lot of fun. So
I agree. Totally agree.
and I can't tell you how much I appreciate continuing to be a part of your team, Allison, and watching our successes since you've come on board. What do you kind of vision for 2025?
Now or never.
But you and I both know it. Now is not a finite, moment in time. It's now or never, but it's a never-ending challenge. So
I was sitting looking at the budget for next year. It's going to be closing in on $12 million, and it was about 3 when I got here. So we're going to keep riding the bus as far as we can go, because one thing I've learned in life is when you're on a roll, keep rolling.
you learn that when you're snowboarding or snow skiing on a hilly area, you don't slow down going up the hill.
Yep.
You got to keep your momentum up.
Yep.
Exactly right.
So, well, that's it from me. If anybody doesn't have any more questions, thank you all very much, and onward and upward.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Allison, again. Thank you so much. And thank you, Rick and Faith, for sponsoring this series. I think it's been incredible for our staff to get to, educate our members, and hopefully equally as beneficial for our members to kind of hear some of the different things we've got going on behind the scenes. So we're so grateful to you for sponsoring this. And I'll just add, Rick, that I'll be sure to place the order for that gopher tortoise costume in your size, so that we can make all these dreams come to life at the annual meeting. So thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your day.